Today I'm going to show you a super delicious fermented coffee drink which uses leftover ingredients and works every single time. It's equally delicious on its own as a refreshing coffee and pineapple drink, or it also works really well in coffee cocktails. Let's make some Coffee Tepache. Welcome back to the Coffee Cocktail channel. I'm Dan Fellows, and what exactly is Coffee Tepache? So tepache is a really popular Mexican drink made from pineapple rinds, spices such as cinnamon and sugar, which are then fermented together with water, and it's super delicious, really refreshing, and a really banging summer drink. But when you think of those flavors, pineapple, sugar, spice, fermentation, the one thing that I think that really needs, obviously, is coffee. And this gives you a little bit more caffeination in the summer drink, as well as making it really delicious and adding another layer of complexity. This particular recipe is super easy. I drink so much of it because it is so easy to make, and it just works every single time. I've never had a failed batch, so I'm going to share it with you today. So for our Coffee Tepache, we're going to need a ripe pineapple, between around about 800 grams to 1.2 kilos, which is your sort of medium-sized pineapple. And you want to make sure you give this a really good wash before you make the tepache. We're going to need your leftover coffee grounds from your brewing that morning, which can be espresso or filter coffee, some cinnamon or your choice of spices, light muscovado sugar, good quality sea salt, and a litre of cold water. Equipment wise, we're going to need a big old bowl, actually 2 of these, which are at least 2 litres in size. You could use a pot or a pan, whatever you've got at home, as a receptacle for this. Make sure these are fully washed and sterilised as well. And we're going to need a sieve and a fine strainer, or muslin cloth would work really well as well. Going to need a scale to build our tepache on, a chopping board, good quality knife, and a whole lot of patience, because this takes quite a long time. Once you've done your prep up front, which is only a couple of minutes, you need to wait for at least 2 to 3 days for the fermentation process to happen. So to start our tepache, we're going to top and tail our pineapple. And when you're choosing a pineapple, make sure it's nice and ripe, because obviously the riper the flavour, the more kind of sweetness we're going to get in our tepache. And in order to check whether your pineapple is ripe, my research tells me you need to smell the bottom of the pineapple. And it should smell like a pineapple, which this one does, which is a good sign. So if it doesn't have any smell, it's probably a little bit underripe, and because it's not on the tree anymore, it's not really going to ripen anymore. So we're going to get kind of sharp and tangy pineapple flavors, which isn't really what we want. So do your best to get a nice ripe pineapple. It should potentially have some yellow coming through as well, which is a really good sign, and it shouldn't be super firm. So pineapple selection, very important. Go for a nice ripe pineapple and a sort of medium size. So get rid of these. This is the only real waste in the recipe, although it could be a nice garnish. So these rinds are actually what we're going to be using. So we're going to take all of these off our pineapple, and then this is what we're going to add to the full mix. So assuming your pineapple is round about a kilo, give or take a couple of 100 grams, I would expect the rind, which we're going to be using, and also the core, to weigh about 300 grams. So now we're going to use our scale, start building our tepache. So let's check whether this is a standard pineapple yield. So 200 there, and then we want to remove kind of all the good stuff, which we're going to use in a future video, so stay tuned for that. And then we're going to take out the core. So again, the core isn't great. It's kind of really hard, really has a sort of melony flavour. And we just want to chop this up into 4, pop this in with our rinds, and we're at 280 grams. So again, round about 300 grams is perfect. And then to this, we're going to add our spent coffee. So with our coffee, we want to add around about 50 grams of our spent grounds. So these have already been extracted to make either espresso or filter coffee, or however you drink coffee in the morning. It doesn't really matter. But the one thing you do want to consider is that if it's a finer grind, it's going to give more intensity of coffee flavour in the final drink. So this is actually espresso grounds, because I like quite a lot of coffee flavour. Whereas if you used maybe a cafetiere leftover, you'd probably get a little bit less intensity from the coffee, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because tepache is delicious anyway. But I do like the coffee flavour in there, and it really complements the other ingredients nicely. So when you're choosing a coffee, similarly, a really light roast coffee with kind of fruity, brighter characteristics is going to bring that to the final drink, whereas a darker roast, more chocolatey coffee will bring more kind of rich flavours, more caramelisation, both of which are delicious. Feel free to experiment, but as long as you put around about 50 grams in there, you're going to be in a really good place. So to the pineapple rinds, pineapple core and ground coffee, we're going to add our spice. So I'm just going with cinnamon because I think cinnamon and pineapple is pretty much the most amazing flavor combination in the world. They're perfect partners. And we want to go with 10 grams of broken cinnamon sticks just to give it a really nice cinnamon flavor in the final tepache. So you could actually use any spices you like, but a pro tip here is if you're going to go with cloves, don't overdo it because cloves have got such an intense flavor. You'd only need 1 or 2 in here and that'd give you plenty of that clovey flavor. Any more and it'd be completely overpowered. So 10 grams of cinnamon I'm going with. And next up, we want to add light muscovado sugar. Again, you can use pretty much any sugar you like. You could use a white sugar, a castor sugar. You can use a darker sugar like a molasses. You could use a brown sugar, but I really like the kind of toffee stickiness of light muscovado sugar and the kind of fudgy flavor it imparts to the final drink. And you do need this sugar because this is kind of a key part of the fermentation. So the final drink isn't a sweet drink because we've got the acidity from the pineapple and also from the kind of fermentation process, but you do need to make sure the sugar's in there to make everything work. So you're going to want 100 grams of light muscovado sugar. We're going to go for 2 grams of sea salt, which, as I've said in many previous videos, isn't to make the drink salty, it's just to bring out all the other flavors in there. And then to all of this, we want to add a litre of cold water. And as long as the water tastes good, is obviously safe, then you're going to be in a really good place. So that's covered everything over. Now you can see why we need the big bowls. And we're just going to give that a little mix together to make sure all of the ingredients are fully mixed. Don't worry about the sugar being fully dissolved because it's going to be in here for at least 3 days. So that's the kind of prep of our coffee tepache done. You could probably have this in 2 minutes if you weren't talking through everything. As you can see, it's a really easy recipe. All we want to do now is let this ferment. So you want to make sure this is covered but not tightly sealed because it could explode, so do be careful. Make sure everything's fully submerged, and then you want to keep an eye on this, check it and give it a stir every 24 hours. And then what you want to look for is kind of bubbles coming to the surface of the coffee tepache, and that's a really good sign. It looks kind of weird, but that means it's kind of doing its thing, it's starting to ferment. And then keep tasting your tepache with a spoon until you get the desired level of fermentation. To be honest, in the first few days it'll taste a little bit too sweet because we've not got the kind of acidity coming from the fermentation, but over time it starts to really balance out and it gets a sort of delicate effervescence as well, which is really delicious. So I'm going to leave this for a few days, and then after a few days, when you've kept checking it, this one actually took about 3.5 days, you want to pass it through the sieve, then through a finer strainer to get rid of any of those coffee grounds, and you can bottle it up ready for drinking. So now it's time to taste. I'm going to head to the freezer to get a frozen glass, which is always the best way to serve cold drinks. And then to serve our tepache, we're going to use a nice clear ice cube, which obviously adds to the look of the drink. And then this is kind of a great soft drink on its own, but you could add rum, you could add tequila, you could add whiskey, you could add mezcal, you could add pretty much any spirit to this, and it's going to taste really good. So here we have our coffee tepache, garnish with a little dried pineapple segment, wheel, whatever you want to call it, which I've dehydrated for, again, 2 to 3 days. And there it is. It's super delicious, very simple, patience requiring coffee tepache. Cheers. This is a terrible straw, but a delicious drink. So you got some of the funk coming through from the fermentation. You could leave this even longer and get more kind of sparkling funkiness, which is no bad thing. Take it to your desired level and then find out where you like it. Keep it in the fridge, but make sure when you store it in the bottle, you just loosen the cap to avoid any kind of explosions, which we don't want. But that is delicious. We've got the really elegant clear ice, and if you want to learn how to make clear ice, I suggest you click here for this very simple method, and you can click here for lots more coffee cocktail fun. So make sure you subscribe to the channel here if you gain value, which I really appreciate, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Cheers. Need to get a new straw. This is a terrible straw.